The headlines won't tell you this, but Japan just ditched the US for Canada in a massive trade move, and it could change the global economy forever. Here's why. Inflation is rising again. The latest numbers show Canadian inflation climbed to 2.4% in September. But while most people panic about prices, there's a bigger story hiding beneath the surface. This isn't just about groceries costing more, this is about the entire global economy shifting. And Canada, believe it or not, is starting to win. First, let's deal with that inflation spike. Grocery prices are pushing the overall numbers up, but why are groceries more expensive? It's not because Canadian farms are failing or because demand is out of control. It's because of where we get our food. Canada imports a massive amount of its vegetables from the US. And when American prices go up because of labor shortages, immigration crackdowns, or just policy mismanagement, we inherit their inflation. You see it in the lettuce aisle. You see it in the spinach bin. That's the first domino. But food is just the beginning. Tariffs are doing something far more dangerous to our economy than making vegetables expensive. They're quietly killing one of our most vulnerable industries, auto manufacturing, and replacing it with something no one expected. I drive a Subaru Outback Wilderness. It's perfect for getting to my fishing spots and exploring Canada's back roads. When I bought it, I never thought about where it was made. Turns out mine was assembled in the United States. That used to be a good thing. We had cross-border supply chains, integrated factories, and a smooth flow of vehicles between the two countries. But not anymore. At a recent oil change, the dealership told me something that caught me off guard. Subaru is halting production of Canadian-bound vehicles in the US and moving that production back to Japan. Not because they hate Americans, not because they love Canadians, but because the math no longer makes sense. The US slapped tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. Canada responded with retaliatory tariffs on American cars. And suddenly, it cost too much to build a Canadian car in the United States. So, Japan said, enough. We'll just build them at home. That's not an isolated case. It's part of a global trend. Japan's exports are rising despite US tariffs. In September alone, Japan's exports grew by 4.2%. Their shipments to Asia jumped by 9.2%. Meanwhile, China's exports to the US are down 25%. But their overall trade hasn't collapsed. They're just selling more to Southeast Asia, Africa, and Europe. In other words, they're adapting. And now, so is Canada. Canadian exports to the US have dropped, yes, but our overall exports are holding strong. We're building new trade relationships with countries like the United Kingdom, Singapore, and Italy. In May, we hit a record high for exports to non-US countries. Alberta beef is now being sold in Mexican costos, taking over shelf space that used to be dominated by American cuts. That deal was the result of a direct negotiation between Canadian and Mexican leaders, cutting the US out entirely, and it worked. But while Canada is adapting in many areas, our auto industry is dangerously exposed. When GM announced it was stopping electric van production in Canada, it wasn't just another corporate headline, it was a signal. A week earlier, Stellantis said it was moving production of a new vehicle from a Toronto suburb to Illinois. And here's the harsh truth. The Canadian auto sector is one of the few industries where we can't easily pivot. We are not a global leader in car production. We don't have the pricing power or scale of Germany, China, or even Mexico. Mexico exports $160 billion worth of vehicles every year and only imports $65 billion. That gives them a trade surplus of nearly $100 billion. Canada, by contrast, exports about $60 billion in cars, but imports $90 billion. We're running a trade deficit. Worse, almost all of our car exports go straight to the US. And now they're all being hit with tariffs. The US wants to shrink its trade deficit. That's understandable. But their solution is to choke Canadian exports until we collapse or move our factories south. And make no mistake, they're succeeding. Our auto exports are vulnerable, our manufacturing base is shrinking, and we haven't built the relationships or incentives needed to replace the lost demand. But here's where things get interesting. Canadian consumers hold the key to flipping this situation entirely. We import $90 billion worth of vehicles every year. Almost all of that comes from the US. We are by far their biggest customer. The US exports $144 billion worth of cars annually, and we buy the lion's share. If Canadian buyers simply stop purchasing US-made cars, we can their export market. And we've done it before. Remember when Canadians boycotted US tourism or US wine? We absolutely crushed those industries, not with government bailouts, not with tariffs, just with consumer action, and we can do it again. Why keep supporting a country that's deliberately targeting one of our most important industries? Why send our money to factories that are actively abandoning us? Instead, we could choose to buy cars made in Canada, cars made in Japan, cars made in Germany, anywhere but the United States. Even China, the second biggest car exporter in the world, is off limits because of our own tariffs. But maybe that's a conversation we need to have. Maybe it's time we stop copying US policy and start thinking for ourselves. If we opened up to Chinese manufacturers under the right conditions, perhaps they'd build factories here. That could offset what we're losing to Illinois and Indiana. But it would take leadership, it would take strategy, it would take vision. More importantly, it would take pressure from us, the consumers. We need to speak with our wallets. Every car purchase is a $10,000, $20,000 or $30,000 economic vote. And right now, we're voting for our own decline. If you're getting value from this, hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. It doesn't take a national campaign. It doesn't take a government program. It takes awareness. That's it. Next time you're at a dealership, ask where the car was built. If the answer is the United States, walk away. Simple. That one decision sends a signal that Canadian consumers are paying attention and that we will not reward a country that penalizes our industries. Imagine what would happen if even half of us changed our buying behavior. 40 million people live in Canada. If just 1 in 10 decided to stop buying US-manufactured cars, that's billions of dollars rooted into our own economy or into trading partners who treat us fairly. Dealerships would be forced to stock different vehicles. Automakers would notice the shift. Policymakers would too. This isn't theory, it's economics, it's demand. And demand drives everything. The irony in all of this is that the US is trying to protect its own jobs, but in the process, it's making itself less competitive. Companies like Subaru are not ideological. They don't care about borders or politics. They care about cost, about margins. And when production in America gets too expensive or too risky, they leave just like they're doing now. Meanwhile, Canada is still positioned to benefit from this global pivot if we play our cards right. We have trade agreements with Europe, with Asia, and with our North American neighbors. We are politically stable, resource-rich, and economically reliable. The only thing we lack is confidence. Confidence in our leverage, confidence in our consumers, confidence in ourselves. We've been conditioned to believe that we're always at the mercy of our bigger neighbor, that we can't win in a trade war, that we should just keep quiet and adapt. But the truth is, we are the market. We are the customer. And in a capitalist world, the customer is king. It's time we start acting like it because this isn't just about trade. It's not just about car prices or tariff percentages. It's about sovereignty, about economic independence, about making sure our future isn't tied to decisions made in Washington by people who don't have our interests in mind. The US has made its position clear. They're not backing down from tariffs. They're not giving Canada a break. So why are we still giving them our money? Let's be real. The Canadian auto industry is not perfect. We're not going to become Germany overnight, but we do have factories. We do have workers. And if demand increases, so will supply. We can build a more resilient auto sector, but only if we create the conditions for that growth. It starts with us, one decision at a time, one purchase at a time. And if you're wondering whether any of this will matter in the grand scheme of things, remember this. The US imports almost $400 billion worth of vehicles annually. It is the world's biggest net importer of cars. No one wants American-made cars on a global scale. Their export market relies on just a few key customers. And we're the biggest. We could crush that industry today if we wanted to. And maybe we should. Not out of revenge, not out of anger, but out of strategy, out of self-respect, out of a desire to build an economy that works for us, not against us. So the next time you hear someone say Canada is broken or there's nothing we can do, remember this video. Remember the numbers, remember the leverage. Because the truth is, Canada holds all the cards. We just need to play them.